everybody. Welcome to the podcast. It may interest you to know. I'm Toni Marcolini. And again, I'm super excited today. I'm excited every time I start the podcast because I have such wonderful guests all the time. Today, I have an Emmy nominated composer from Nashville and her business partner. So, welcome with me, Shevy Smith and Khalid Jones. Welcome.
Hello, Toni.
Thank you.
So you guys have exciting careers, and I'm overwhelmed by the accomplishments that both of you have achieved at such young ages. It almost at a loss as to where to begin. There was so much material to go through. But I think, Shevy, I'm going to start with you. So let me take you back to your youth. I read something that you learned how to play the piano at 4 years old. Is that true?
That is correct. Yeah, it wasn't, I don't come from a family of maestros, but I do come from a family of very disciplined, kind of, you're going to do something, try to be really good at it, or at least as excellent as you can be. So yeah, my parents were really big on the reading, and music and notation is kind of another language that they really, they had all of us kids in quite young, and it was just something I just immediately loved. They didn't really have to badger me to practice or anything too much. So I don't think they had any idea that it was going to be any sort of profession or anything like that, and they never pushed that. But yeah, quite early. I was grateful for that later in life.
So a passion right away from when you're young. Did it start off? Can you remember, were you like listening to the radio a lot, singing along? Was it just like a passion that you were drawn to music, or was there like a piano in the house and you were pecking away?
It was definitely a bit of both. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Kansas. And so really nature was a stimulation, but there wasn't a lot of media around. We didn't have neighbors. It was just really, my brothers and I would make up games, and we would make up songs, and it was really an entertain yourself sort of proposition. And kind of in the spirit of that, my parents had, we did have a piano. There were guitars here and there. I remember listening to Dolly Parton, the Jolene record, really early, and knowing that she wrote all of those songs. And then also pretty formative, the first concert that I ever went to, my mother took me to, was this songwriter named Matraca Berg, who ended up kind of being like anything you heard on mid 90s to late 90s country radio was probably from a female, was probably written by her, and from males. Like, she was just a really prolific, really profoundly influential songwriter, which we had no idea. I just saw her and just saw, oh, she made up these songs. This is what a person does. So I think I kind of lucked out that those impressions were my early impressions of what you do with any sort of musical skill. And then I had a teacher. I had piano teachers the whole way through, but I had one piano teacher who pulled me aside when I was probably, I don't know, third or fourth grade. And she was like, like, I got lots of kids that like doing this, but you could really do this. Like, you could do this at a world-class level. If this is what you would want to do, like, wow, you'd need to like hone in, but whatever, like, it is, like, you got it. And that was really all I needed to hear. I was like a religious convert at that point. Like, nothing else mattered. It's all I cared about. And I would like ride around on my horse making up songs. And it was really this bucolic, like, I really couldn't have drawn a better ticket as childhoods go, and as far as supportive family goes. And by the time I was 14, I was kind of like dubbing cassettes back and forth, producing my own songs. And
so you started writing. There comes a point in time where you're actually creating your own material.
Absolutely. Yeah. It didn't really occur. It's just probably like simplicity more than anything. Like, it didn't really occur to me that I would do other people's songs because they'd done those songs. Why would I do that? It was like
I love that.
This thing where it wasn't like, and my family didn't, they were supportive, but they never acted like it was extraordinary that I would. They're like, well, of course, you play things, you sing things, make things. Like, what, like, my dad's a carpenter, and like, everybody kind of like make stuff. And so so then those cassettes found their way to a really wonderful producer in New York, and I started going to the city when I was like 15, and
It signed you to a publishing deal, right? There comes a point in time
exactly, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow, to a major. So you're like 14, signed to a major publishing deal.
I think by the
I
time
mean,
it all went through, I was like 16, but yeah, like I was working on production deals at the time, and it was a little before, I mean, like none of this TikTok stuff, like American Idol hadn't started. So it was an interesting thing, you know, and my parents were very like interesting. Like when we look back, like they had me emancipate so that I could sign contracts, because they're like, well, we're not signing you into contracts, you know, like you want to do this, like learn about it and do it yourself. And that part's been, you know, like I couldn't have asked for better early training, you know. I mean, it's really I think that's one of the ways that like Khalid and I really connected, you know, as business partners and just like-minded individuals, is really that like self-starter. Like if you want something to exist, make it, you know. If you want to know about something, go study it, go read it, go learn about it. And all through the way, like whether it's been in music, you know, producers I've worked with, and I've always ended up kind of pairing well with other like really autonomous, self-starter, sort of curious people, you know.
yeah, yeah. I'm not surprised. I think you're kind of like a magnet. I think you're just enthusiasm for creating is obvious, and I could see people being drawn easily to you.
Well, thank you.
So there comes a point in time where you create is it Fort Posey? Am I pronouncing that?
Forte, yeah, Forte Posey. Yeah.
Forte
So
Posey. So can we talk about that a little bit?
absolutely, yeah. So I did go hard when I was young, and I toured a ton. But you know, like during my late teens, early 20s, I was playing like 250 shows a year at colleges and universities. And I mean, what a time to do it. Like I wanted to be out there. I wanted to, you know, it was really getting to see America and getting to see the world like at a real granular level, you know. I
And
think
your
it
own
was
material, right? You're
absolutely,
performing your own
yeah.
material. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That part still kind of stuns me, that people like, because I was unknown. I mean, I've always been unknown the whole way through. Like there was never some big break, and it was never, you know, like kind of this critical mass. But for whatever reason, my agents were always really able to get these shows that paid really well for me to go sing these songs that I'd made up. And so I did that really hard, and then the result was I'd been doing it about a decade, and I was kind of burnt out, and wondered if there was more, you know, and wanted to kind of seg more into production perhaps. And I honestly just, I wanted to like live by a beach and, you know, maybe not be traveling all days of the year. And so yes, I moved to LA, and ended up getting really inspired by working with younger writers. And so ended up starting kind of this lesson program to teach guitar and piano. And I would just kind of like, I lived in this beach town, would just like skateboard around with my little like guitar and work with these girls. And then a curriculum kind of formed itself. And then that kind of grew into working with in different Title I schools, doing these songwriting programs, infusing poetry. It's a super random and a long story, but basically during my artist career, I went to Afghanistan and Iraq several times with the USO, and really just developed such a like love and passion for Afghanistan and for the poetry of like contemporary Afghan poetry that was being written there, and got really involved in a program that was coordinating programs for that. And so Forte Posey kind of ended up being this amalgamation of like bringing poetry from women there and refugee projects, and then having it like synthesized with student songwriters. So Forte Posey kind of ended up being this whole songwriting factory, if you will, that like had a lot of young people in it that were creating really cool stuff, which kind of actually is how Khalid and I ended up working together, because a lot of the girls in that program got really, really good, and it was time to make legitimate recordings and you know, really try and push whatever they were doing forward and encourage and support that. And I knew that I didn't singularly have the business acumen or the resources or the, you know, just the ingenuity to do that. And that's really how Khalid and I kind of paired up, because he had so many great ideas on how we could launch this music out in the world and how we could do this artist development company, which led directly into what we're doing now. So it's all been a, you know, one thing has tripwired the next for sure, which has been kind of a lovely, lovely life.
Well, what a worthwhile project. I mean, I think New York and right, New York, California, and the Canada maybe picked up this curriculum and
Yeah.
started using it. Yeah.
Yeah, we did it in London. I mean, it was a really special time, you know. It was just it definitely made me aware of how powerful and universal music is, and that as much as we, you know, as much as sometimes it seems like a trivial part of society, I think, you know, art and the connectivity that comes through that is so vital, you know, and it's not always from the most famous sources, you know. It was really heartening, like, just, it was so many, you know, kids and so many people who weren't doing it to become famous or to, you know, have any monetary success. It was just expression for expression's sake. So.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think creativity is such an important part of life. And I'm fascinated. We were talking a little bit before we went on, and I'm truly fascinated by the creative process. Actually, I have two questions, but I want to bring Khalid in a little bit. Do you remember meeting Shevy, Khalid? Do you remember that first introduction?
It's definitely, you know, Shevy is someone who is an accomplished creative, and as me was someone who just loves music. And, you know, back in the day, myself wrote music, made songs and things like that, not at the same level as Shevy had, but someone who's loved the music, steeped in, you know, sort of the history of hip hop in particular. Thought that there were like-mindedness, and you know, you even see, you know, probably for myself, I think about when I hear Chevy's story, I think the thing that drew me to Chevy from a professional standpoint at the first instance is, and you just heard the story, it's kind of personal ingenuity, stick-to-itiveness, belief in oneself, and really going for it. And obviously you have that, you hear, you know, musicians and athletes, and they get asked questions like, oh, you know, what was the thing that really pushed you forward? And they name all these other things, but they forget to mention that they had, you know, like world-class talent.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, you remember first meeting him, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, he's an attorney and an expert in technology, right?
Yeah.
So it seems more almost the mindset seems to me a little different, right?
Absolutely.
Like, than yours. So it seems like you might be a balance to each other. Yes.
You nailed it. And we couldn't have known that when we first, you know, started kind of hatching some of these ideas. Like, in retrospect, that's one of the best things about our business dynamic, is that we really don't, we agree on so much, but we don't overlap. And so I think we're able to like do the checks and balances thing really, really well. But what I recall from the get-go was recognizing like, oh, this is a creative who just went and became a Stanford educated attorney. You know, like this is not, none of his accomplishments in the business world like could dampen the fact that he was a creative. And that, I mean, he speaks like a writer. You can just tell that there's just a command of language that isn't just all, you know, technical and bookish, that it's very like artistic. I remember he used the word vestige like early, like somewhere in one of our first conversations. And I was like, oh, that's such a good word, you know? And so it's that sort of thing. But I think the other part that immediately kind of led us into the, hey, I need help putting together some shape of something business wise, and like you'd be my first choice, was that when we would talk about the mechanisms of the business and talk about like basically standard practices, he would always be like, but why? Why would they do, why is this standard this way? Like, that makes no sense. And when you get into the music industry, I think all of us within it really do have that same, like, we know the way that it's done maybe isn't right, or maybe it's not the most logical, but because he had such a wide array of business experience and also had been so highly successful in those areas. I mean, when we first met, he was one of the first owners of an esports team, like really got in early on some of these ideas that a lot of other business minds wouldn't see, the potential and the upside and the execution too. So yeah, with him, it was like, I was like, well, this person's just a writer in lawyer's clothes, like this person. And also, and it shouldn't be like,
that's the name of my next album, Chevy.
I know. No, but also by that age, my attorneys throughout my life have been some of the most interesting, eclectic people. Like Rosemary Carroll was my first attorney. And I mean, she was, part of the management group of Nirvana, and she had Patti Smith, and my attorney was a rock star, and so I had this perception of like, oh, like this guy's like definitely a writer and a creative, but also he's been attorneying at the highest level. You don't go to Stanford Law School because you don't know what else to do with your life. You go because like you're doing things at a certain level, and you're able to write and communicate at a certain level. So I think for me, that coupled with the innovative things he was doing and the way he questioned standard practices within the industry was like, yep, that person's my competitive edge. Let's do that, sort of thing.
For me, Toni, as well, it was a matter of looking at, you always have a little bit of nostalgic, I won't say regret, but nostalgia, like, oh, maybe I could have done this, or maybe I could have done that. And then you look at, the way that the world is progressing. So I graduated college in the year 2000. We're in 2022 now. And so the idea for me when I was coming out of college and coming out of law school, that I would be entering, a law firm in New York and saying, oh, by the way, I'm also this musician, and you might be able to find my album someplace online. That was a dichotomy that really wasn't, certainly not externally acceptable at that time. And so you have this internal struggle. You fast forward 2 decades, you've got Antonio Delgado, who is a Harvard Law School graduate, a Rhodes Scholar, and he also released rap albums before going to Congress in 2018. And unseating an incumbent Republican at the same time. So you've got, and he was, 30, however young he was, those 4 years ago. And he's slated to win re-election again. So the idea that someone from my era, our way of expressing that, if you got to a certain level, is, well, maybe you can be part of it in a management capacity or an ownership capacity. And so I'm happy to see that this generation is saying, no, you can be the creative, and you can be the Harvard Law School guy, and you can be the congressman if you wanted to. That kind of convergence of demographics and interests is really heartening to see, and something that certainly we embodied in a different kind of expression.
Well, I think that, to be anything successful, and certainly, to partner up with somebody, you both have to have a vision, right? Like a vision that has to somehow align at some point. So when's the moment for the two of you that you realized, hey, our visions align?
I think it was early on. I think the thing I would add also to alignment of vision is also, somewhat of a separation of powers, or an acknowledgement of expertise. And so when you look back at the original union, I wasn't going to come in and say, hey, Chevy, this hi-hat needs to go here, right? Like that's not what that's not what I was needed for at all. While at the same time, you have to have enough of the shared vision has to be the end place where you want to wind up. I think has to be shared, and then you sort of talk about how you get there, because along the way, what you hope happens is that you're able to accentuate your skill set and what you do well, but that whether osmotically or intentionally, you actually get some bleed over from what the other person or people who you are partnering with do. And I know I see particularly in Chevy's side, just from I mean, she was always a business person because she was her own, she was going on the road and started her own company, and that curriculum got accepted and went forward in that fashion. But to see the sort of strategic vision that she's able to lay out now without my assistance, right? If I met Chevy today, I don't know that she would necessarily need to partner with anyone other than saying, I've got some great ideas and going out and maybe finding capital. So I think that shared vision in the beginning was this idea that the industry, the music industry, had various pockets that were ripe for disruption. And we had put our fingers on a couple of those and sort of successively went one by one to see if we could do something on that front.
Well, I have to go back to Chevy then and ask you this. I ask every person that where I want to pick their brain, but what does the creative process look like for you? I mean, because you're young, right? You're 10 years old, you're a kid and you're starting to create your own music. I mean, how and what does that look like for you? I mean, I've heard so many different stories from different people that I've interviewed, right? Some people, I have to go out for a jog, it clears my mind. Some people, I'm in the shower and my best material comes to me while I'm showering. I often say Matthew Dix, right, the writer, he said, I can't think anywhere really much behind the computer, right? I need to be sitting there with my hands on the keyboard and the characters tell me what they want to say. And that's how I fly through it. That's how he creates. How do you create? What's your process?
I mean, I think that there's a couple of happy accidents that have happened. And one was that I started writing before I really had an awareness of self. And so I didn't really have, nobody told me that all these conditions were supposed to be correct in order for me to be tapping into like the magic, And so, I mean, without getting too mystical about it, I really feel like songs, visual art, ideas, it's almost like the stock exchange ticker up here, like above my head at any given point, whether I'm like on a flight or sometimes it's not when you want and you're like sitting at dinner, and you're like, I should be paying attention to this person, but like it's above there and it's kind of always accessible. Like knock on something, I've never had writer's block because it always feels like I could just reach up and grab whatever's there. And like, and
tape, right?
yeah. And it might not be excellent. I think you kind of have to get over yourself that like, oh, everything I create is going to be brilliant and shareable. Like I've written thousands of songs that I would not present to you here being like, and this is a great work from me. But the other visual I always have is a faucet, like you kind of got to run the water for it to get hot. You can't just turn it on and be like, but it's not hot. The water's not hot. You got to like let it run a little bit. You've got to be willing to have some cold water fall on you and be a little uncomfortable in that. And so for me, there is no like, I line up my pencils this way and then I like snap 3 times and I mean, I love going on a run. That kind of I think that just generally makes me like a nicer, more relaxed person. I do think of a lot of things when I'm driving or on planes. Like I'll think of like a cool word combo, but most of it is just like in life. I just like fit it in wherever I can, especially now. That's what, our process is so much dealing with developers, which also is very creative and, but it's a different sort of creativity, but I don't know, somehow the same way that I like find a way to breathe without thinking about it too much. I always find a way to like write down like a little verse here and there. Like I ended up finishing a record that's like sitting ready to be mixed and released like amid what is ostensibly one of the busiest times of my life. And mostly it's just like, don't think too hard about it. Just like, write a crummy song, write a good song, write a lot of songs. Like you'll work it out in post,
Well, that's it. That's really interesting how you chose to couch that. You likened it to breathing, Right, just like no one tells me how to breathe, right? I just
Yeah.
it's so ingrained in just your, your living process. Creating comes that naturally.
I think that's one reason why I love working with kids before they hit that self-conscious point, because like drawing's like breathing to them, like, right, I mean, all of these things, it doesn't occur to you until a certain age that you should do it in an effort to be perfect, or in an effort to be admired, or in an effort to be lauded or clapped for, or anything, and so I think, I mean, that's, Khalid as a little one, like that would be my like advice to any parent, just based on my like limited experience of life, though, is like, man, like have them steeping in that tea like way before they have any chance to like be self-conscious about it. And then it's just a natural like function of how your brain kind of works. But I mean, I don't know, I've only ever lived in my own brain, so I don't know if that's how it works, but that's how like mine seems to work.
What is clock radio? You started writing on a clock radio, is this accurate?
Oh, it is. I mean, you could probably find one at any good yard sale. It's like the Sharp is a brand, or like Tascam, and it had a clock, like an alarm clock, so I'd like have to get up for basketball practice, but it also had a cassette player where you could press play and record at the same time. So I got two of them, and then would just like dub back and forth, and that was my early, very punk rock recording process.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
So Khalid, do you write music as well?
Yeah, I mean, as a certainly as a hobby, I do. And so
he's excellent. Don't let him demur from that. Like he's a brilliant lyricist.
I appreciate that, Chevy, but certainly as a hobby, and I've been doing it for a long time. And I really always thought it was never really told to me when I was coming up. Like I said, I took a much more traditional academic route, but my favorite music growing up was hip hop, and a particular tranche of that music was particularly inspirational for me. In certain artists, and those tend to be the artists that could manipulate the English language at a really high level, as if every verse sort of was a speech almost, and being introduced to concepts through the music earlier than being introduced them in school. I can remember right now being in the 8th grade in a group called Diggable Planets, rapping about Sartre and Camus, who are these philosophers who you don't really get introduced to maybe until your introduction to philosophy seminar in college, or if you had a certain high school that offers philosophy until then. And so it was early during that time for me when I realized, okay, well, writing music and sort of the academic pursuit, they're not detached from one another in the way that people, sort of pit music, especially hip hop music, especially at that time, early 90s, mid 90s, sort of pit music against sort of civilized society, or against education, or, this is what people do when they're not educated. They make this kind of music. The artists that were inspiring to me, some of them were college graduates, and rapped about it in their songs. Some of them, met in school. Some of them, in the case of some people I was listening to in college, some of them had masters from Columbia or were teaching. So there's this whole wide, and some of them were college dropouts and had been to jail for selling drugs, but also had this penchant for manipulating the English language in a really extraordinary way that if you met them in any other context, you wouldn't know that background about them. So what that did for me in terms of my creativity, even though it didn't extend to any kind of professional music career, it always made me want to keep writing music.
Not many people could do both well, but it sounds like you succeeded at that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it certainly was fun. It was able to do shows, and to, in college, I was, had a spot on the college, radio and things. Not unlike people would do. It just, that was another extracurricular activity that I wanted to put on my plate. Some kids might have done equestrian. I made that part of it, but so was, studying abroad in Japan. So was being president of the student government. So was any number of the things that, a lot of people who are just engaged in that time in your life are doing. It just so happened that I had this other thing that I really like to do.
Chevy, I have to ask you, you're Emmy nominated, right? So
Mhm.
where are you when you hear the news that you've been nominated for an Emmy?
Oh, that was funny. I was teaching actually, and I just got a text. So I think I was teaching somebody like the G pentatonic scale, and then you get the text, and then you go right back to it. So
Yeah, you're
yeah.
like, oh, an Emmy. Oh, okay.
Well, I mean,
Back to the lesson.
I will say the other thing, like once you kind of get along in, and you've been in this long enough, it's like truly by the time it had happened in this town, you know, like we had an event in New York the other night, and one of my friends who came, I think he's won like 17 Emmys at this point, you know, from like if you're like producer and a technical, like you do so many projects and you're doing them at a high enough level, it's almost like this thing where I don't know how to say it correctly, but like enough people that I know had been honored that way and had been through that process that in a way you're kind of like, phew, I'm glad I at least got like something like that, you know, like maybe checked off the list.
Can I hop in here for just a moment, because both
because
of
it
us
helps you get hired again, you know? So like, yeah, that's the main thing.
If I can hop in here for a moment, Toni, both you and I have done professional pursuits. All of us on the call right now have had professional pursuits in our life. It's like a little, and I'm a big basketball fan now, and I'm watching the NBA finals. It's a little bit like saying, well, if you just play long enough on enough teams, you're going to make the NBA finals. That ain't true. That ain't true. So whatever this answer is that was going on, I'm not asking for it to be stricken from the record or anything like that. I just want to jump in and say that I don't know that if you've done it long enough, you're going to accidentally get nominated for an Emmy is sort of factually or sort of historically correct.
Correct. I will say it just feels silly being like, oh, you know, like I'm not terribly impressed with myself, especially when I look around at so many friends and collaborators and everything who are, you know, deservedly a million times more lauded in that way. It just is kind of like, I'll tell you what, it was fun. Those things are so fun for your family because there's so much about what you do that's really hard to explain, or that just is boring to explain, or just doesn't make sense. And then that happens in like Emmy, Grammy, Academy, like those are words that are universal and mean something. And so I think it was fun for
they don't need an explanation nor an external validator.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just kind of like that part was kind of cool. Like my mom went with me to the ceremony, and it was on the technical side. So it was like the night before. So it's way more laid back, but my mom went with me. Like she's so outgoing and gregarious. She ended up ditching my table, and she ended up at the Ellen table because they were winning more. Like they won everything that night. And so she was like, well, they're kind of sweeping over here. I'm going to be over here. So it ended up being like this lovely experience that we had together. And obviously the people that on the project that I was nominated with, my friend Leanne Irvin, who brought me into it, who has won many Emmys, you know, like she and I had a great night that night. So it is really about like the friendship and kind of the experience. And that was a really fun stretch of time for my family too. So that was good.
Well, you know what I say, write enough books, you're going to win a Pulitzer. So it's like.
yeah, I heard that, right? I mean, that's just.
Yeah. No, what I say is if you take your mom to the Emmys, she's going to ditch you for the Ellen table because they're winning everything.
I think that's the important part of the story.
That's what you need to remember. Exactly.
I have to say, you know what? If somebody texted me that I won an Emmy, I'm checking out for the day. I'm running.
Yeah. Well, I did not win one. I got it was a nomination.
Well, nominated. Yes.
Yeah. But
nominated.
No, that's
somebody
very, very
nominated.
That is winning for humans. For humans, being nominated for an Emmy is winning.
Yeah.
I'm running today.
A friend of mine who has been nominated for Grammys, who's a producer, who's you know, well known within like the inner of the industry, was like, well, you can breathe a sigh of relief because that's going to like hold your pay grade steady for a little while, you know? And so I think like when you're on kind of the working class and middle class side of the entertainment industry, what those do mean are like, okay, good, maybe I'll be able to continue working a bit longer and like maintain a certain level. So that part I remember being very, very excited about. So
We have to talk about your latest collaboration, Elite Shout.
yes.
Okay, so how did this come about? Tell me the story.
Well, so Elite Shout is the company that we started when we were doing artist development, and you know, where we had these young artists, so talented, great work ethics, and wanted to kind of create a framework in which we could release their music and try to help, you know, get their careers, you know, launched. And so Ultimate Playlist, which is the app that we're releasing here shortly, is kind of the result of all of that work. And like Khalid said, realizing that there's these pain points and there's these gaps in what is offered to artists, especially these kind of baby artists and middle class artists and legacy artists who are, you know, basically anybody who's not a superstar. You know, we really became understanding through experience of how hard it is to break through. And I'll let Khalid speak to how it all kind of coalesced, but we were really recognizing pain points. We were really interested in how gamifying the listening experience could perhaps create more fans for new artists. We were interested in incentivized and lean forward listening versus lean back listening, which is what happens on a lot of these monstrous playlists, and just ways to kind of ensure incremental wins for these artists. Because similar to what I was just saying, you know, you're really in the trenches most of the time as a working class creative. And so getting these boosts, getting these wins, getting that text, you know, how can we create those moments for artists where they have a bit more autonomy about the level of success or fans that they accrue? And yeah, I'll let you kind of speak, Khalid, how Ultimate Playlist kind of came to be what it is.
Toni, especially for a podcast like yours, when people listen or anything in sort of this vein that looks like success at the end, there's a tendency to believe that if it's not overnight necessarily, that you went from no idea to whatever the innovation is that you're seeing as the successful idea that has you appearing on podcasts. When the fact of the matter is the journey to creating what we've created today went through this first iteration that Chevy talked about with respect to, all right, we've got these artists. So the more traditional, you've got artists, you want to get their songs out. What are the channels to do so? And that's, I think, when we started to say, what are the channels to do so? And technology has progressed really, really fast on that front, whether it's in terms of making music yourself. You know, it's gone from an era where you had to be in a studio where you can make a song in 5 minutes in your bedroom. You know, went on to distribution where you had to go to the store to buy a CD. I remember the era when you could press your own CD came out when I was in college. And we were like, oh, well, there's music technology there. No one's going to have to, there goes the labels. you can press your own CD. But what we discovered was that while the technology moved really quickly in some of these areas, such as being able to make your own songs, so studios haven't been obsolete, but they've been made less expensive and more accessible. Distribution's been made less expensive, more accessible. One of the areas that still stuck was promotion. And as we were thinking about how do we promote these artists, some of the channels to do that had kind of been stale, at least in our opinion. And so we went from that and then thinking about, well, how do artists get their music out and known? And we went through a couple of different iterations of ideas. We had an idea, and they were all surrounding sort of music tech. And when you asked a little bit earlier, you asked about when you knew that there was sort of the direction that coalesced. I'd probably say in terms of the direction that we have now and that we're taking now, it was around the time when we looked at some of the artists that Chevy was producing and saying, well, what happens if this person who's 15 or 16 now when they're 17 or 18 goes, I don't want to do music anymore, and weren't as dedicated as you thought. But you put all this time and effort into something that someone who has their right to do so says that might not be what I want to do. And so we really looked and said, what can we do in the music tech side to build structures rather than relying on specific individuals? And so one of the things early on that we thought about was, and this was at the beginning of the pandemic, to say, maybe there are shows that allow people to come on to showcase their songwriting talent. And we're able to put that out in a live stream format where people can see, vote on it, and maybe win prizes if their artist does well. And so we went down that road. And we thought about a couple of different iterations. And then it was really a combination of some of the ideas that we were thinking about. And I also had a pre-existing relationship with the folks at the Arizona State Lottery, who were vitally instrumental into bringing the Ultimate Playlist out into the world. Where they were at the same time, we were looking at, how do artists promote themselves? They were looking at, well, how do we create more connectivity in the world via lottery, but not in a way where we're asking people to buy a lottery ticket? Can we do that? Because they're looking at a new landscape for lottery where mobile gaming competes, where now online sports betting largely is increasingly competing, where different kinds of even lottery type offerings online and mobile are competing in their space, where 25 years ago they weren't there. Things like, I don't know if you know companies like One Country or Omaze, those are giveaway companies that are sort of competing in that space and appealing to a younger demographic. And so they were really desirous to have ideas of how can we make an offering where we're not saying, hey, you person X, come buy a lottery ticket, but just keeping a connectivity to that demographic. And that's when we brought this idea of the Ultimate Playlist, was a free-to-play game where people listen to music to earn tickets to win money at the end of the day. And that was the original iteration that went through lots of refinement to see what we have today.
So this is the point in time. I mean, you're running your company, creative company, and there comes a point in time when you want to develop this particular app that is, I believe, about to launch within the next few weeks.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And so you realize, or through a business connection, you ultimately realize that there's a need connected to the Arizona lottery that maybe something you are working on to begin with could merge and kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's large. I would say that's largely accurate, but it's also, understanding that there's a need out there and being able to look at the kind of things we were looking at and say, well, how can we tweak this to maybe to fit that need? And like you said, kill two birds.
Well, and I think all the way through, like, we've both been very intrigued by data, and the stratification of data in music has become incredibly intriguing just from any perspective. But I mean, at the time, pre-pandemic, there were 40,000 songs a day going to Spotify each and every day. In the midst of pandemic, that got up to 60,000. Now some figures are saying it's 80,000, and that is just going to one DSP, one streaming platform. And so we were in this very real position of looking at 17-year-old kids that put their dream into this song, and to say to managers, now we just got to hope, it was just such a futile feeling thing. And so when we really looked at that, and then you look at the amount of budget that's being spent to promote songs to these kind of opaque playlists, which still have a place. I mean, we're not replacing those at all, but just really thinking of ways we could kind of almost like take it to the people. I had a conversation in the midst of our early iterations of this with someone who's a really, really huge country artist. I mean, she fills arenas, and I was kind of explaining what we were thinking, and she looked at me and she's like, I would give anything to look out at everybody who bought a hard ticket tonight and say, the money we were going to give to all these corporate entities to try to get this song played, all the rings that I was going to go kiss to do that. Like, I would love to just give that to the people, you know? And so I think there's a real kind of take it to the people attitude in what we were thinking of the whole way through, of like, how do we divert this money that would just go to one powerful person, and also the belief, I think, as an artist, you're always like, man, if people just listen to my song, they'd love my song. And so, you know, I remember turning to Khalid and being like, if we're going to pay $5,000 for this, I'd rather give $1 to 5,000 people. Yeah. And I bet we could come away with 250 fans, like real fans. I bet our odds would be higher. And so those were the conversations we were having. And then it was actually right after New Year's in 2020, we met up at Dan Tana's in West Hollywood, kind of like the legendary place right next to Troubadour. And I remember Khalid walking in and him being like, I think I got it. I think these two things are the same thing. Like, I think that this is like symbiotic. And he really, you know, connected those dots, because I wanted to call what we were working on kind of before. I thought it should be called Playola, you know, like I wanted to be like super like, you know, cheeky about it or whatever. And then he luckily brought in this amazing relationship, and the Arizona Lottery people are so creative and they're so about musicians. They're so supportive. Like, that's been a total dream, which nobody would have thought that, you know?
Yeah, their marketing director is a musician himself.
Exactly. So, so he, you know, Khalid walked in, was like, no, these things, like, they go together, they fit. I think there's a way. And so, you know, I was really, really fortunate that all of like the punk rock things I wanted to do, we had a good business side on things too, where Khalid like put all those tied all those together, you know.
So you developed this app. Now tell people what, you know, what will they be able to do if they download the app?
Yes. So this is where this is the exciting part, Toni. So it's called the Ultimate Playlist, and the idea is that you will be served 40 songs every day that you can listen to, and they'll be served in it's like internet radio. You won't be able to pick the next song. You'll listen to the songs as they come. And by listening to the songs, you are able to win money in two different ways. One is that we have daily cash raffles that are a guaranteed prize pool of $2,000 that's given away every day in 18 prizes ranging from $50 to $500. And the way people earn raffle tickets is by listening to songs. If you listen to a certain amount of the song, you earn a ticket. If you listen to more of the song, you earn more tickets. Also by rating the songs on a scale of 1 to 5. We want people to engage and tell us what they think about the songs. If you do that, you'll earn a ticket. And also, we've got the functionality where if you like a song, you can add that to your own personal Apple Music playlist. And we're looking to add on more DSPs in the future. And if you take that action, you also earn a ticket. So we're trying to incentivize people to listen to the songs, to engage with the songs. And that's essentially, from the promotional standpoint, that's what we're selling to artists. We're saying this is why you want to be on this list, is because people are incentivized. And so all the tickets that you earn from listening to the songs are automatically entered at the end of the day for this $2,000 prize pool in these 18 prizes. And every day, 18 people will win amounts between $5 and $500 every single solitary day. So that's one. Secondly, is something that we call the ultimate payout. And that's the opportunity to win $20,000 each day. And the way people earn entries into that is if you listen to at least 30 seconds of half the songs each day, you'll earn 1 entry to the ultimate payout. If you listen to at least 30 seconds of all the songs, you'll earn a total of 3. And you take those entries and then you pick your numbers like Powerball or Mega Millions style. And if your numbers hit, you win $20,000. So that's much longer odds. It's not a guaranteed prize. It's the chance to win it. But we're really excited for people to actually win. It's not one of those prizes that's hanging out there as a straw man. We really want people to play in large enough amounts that someone actually does win that $20,000 on a periodic basis.
Because the money's sitting there. It needs to be won. You know, like that's going to be really, really fun.
Now, is this something that anyone will be able to download on their phone and their tablets, or is it unique to Arizona residents?
No,
nationwide,
Android and iOS.
Okay, so anybody can start getting involved with the Arizona Lottery and enjoying the music. What about artists? How are you drawing the artists in? Are you selecting them after some level of a process, or how would an artist get their song to you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. One, we're doing outreach to people, certainly. The idea that is that this is a promotional, that has the opportunity to be promotional. So an artist can pay to be on the list, which historically in radio has been certainly frowned upon because it hasn't been transparent. Chevy alluded to it earlier with an early iteration of the name Playola. It plays on the illegal practice of payola, which is you pay for songs and you tell people it's, we're just playing this because we love it. However, what we're doing is promotional. It's just promotionally transparent on both sides. We're telling listeners, these people would love for you to listen to this song, and they may have paid promotional consideration for it. At the same time, we have room to make editorial choices of songs that we want to have appear. But certainly for the most amount, we want artists, especially that mid-level artist that Chevy talks about, to use it as a tool to be able to say, I can understand my promotional budget is X. I can put a certain amount of it here, and this is what I expect in terms of feedback.
Yeah, I think that it really is going to open up that black box of data for them as well, because when you're looking at a song, you never know whether I just like this song or do other people like this song, and so getting that back, and it's a really nominal fee. It's going to be between $350 to $400 to appear on the list, which you could not focus group something for 10 times that. It's a really economical way for artists to be really making informed decisions about their own career and where they want to put budget, and then also gain real human fans. This is unbottable, so the people that are playing this game are in the United States. They're living, breathing humans who are probably capable of also following you on Instagram and also coming to your show and also being real life fans. And so I think that proposition holds such great value for artists of every level, really, but especially that middle class and launch level, we're really excited about.
Sure, it's like anything else. I mean, you can put up a song on YouTube and it could go viral, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just getting the exposure to enough people, listening on the app can really light a fire.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's certainly our hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly I can probably ski down a list, right, of artists who've had that exact experience, right? That one day there's some song that they came out with that got shared at the right time in the right place, and life was never the same.
Exactly.
Right. So it sounds like, there's that opportunity in terms of getting your music out there. I also imagine, the executives in the A&R departments of every record company is going to be, checking out your app as well for looking for the talent. So
absolutely, to find talent and then to test, I mean, it's a thing where right now, before they invest in an artist or invest in a song, they can kind of throw it out and throw some little fish food out there and see if people bite, and so I think it's going to be really fun for the kind of like entries into the game that it provides for artists, and that's exciting for us.
Oh, it's almost an instant way of gauging, right? By you having a song out there, engaging, what kind of feedback are you getting almost instantly,
exactly,
and how many people are adding it to their playlist or sharing it. Will there be a way to share it, by the way, if somebody likes the song and they're able to share that song with their friends or from the app, or no?
So because we play the songs natively. If you hear something on the Ultimate playlist, it's not being taken from a link from someplace. So you won't be able to share it from the Ultimate playlist. But what you can do, if you like the song, you can add it to your Apple Music, for example, and then share it via that channel. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're not competing with Spotify. We're not competing with Apple Music. It's an internet radio offering.
Right. So somebody is able to, like you said, add that to one of their other playlists from your app.
That's correct.
Right? There's a mechanism from the app that allows them to add it to their own playlist. And then from there, they can, of course, always share it.
That's correct.
When is this launching?
Well, we're going to get it out here the end of this month. We're going to be out and to the world, and hopefully lots of people, we've got sort of a dual value proposition track going on. We've got hopefully people who want to listen to music and win money are into it. And then obviously, hopefully, like you said, folks are at labels, A&Rs, managers, et cetera. Hopefully they see the value for their artists to promote on it as well. So we're excited.
So, and you're coming up, soon. You'll be launching. Now, is there a cost to download the app?
No, it's totally free to download and always free to play. That's what will be always the case. It will never cost a player money, a listener money to actually enter in the raffles or the games.
Wow. So this is kind of, if you want to engage in the lottery, typically you have to go pay and buy a ticket. Here, just by I almost say giving of your time, right? And in an enjoyable way, you get the opportunity to listen to music. You can earn yourself tickets, lottery tickets, if you will.
Essentially.
Yeah. Not for the same lottery, but a different type of lottery.
It's a different type of game, different type of offering. And certainly one, it was the key to this. And it does not work otherwise, is that it is absolutely positively free to play for the player and always will be.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting.
We're excited. We're excited.
Minute by minute is monitoring our launch schedule, but we go to production servers in probably about 4 hours. So it's getting real. It's definitely going to be out there.
And again, anybody can get it, whether you have a Samsung or you have an Apple device. It's in all the Play stores.
Well,
yes?
that's been part of the democratization of the whole thing. Like our commitment to artists is the democratization of being heard, in the fact that the songs are all delivered in random order. You're never first on everybody's playlist, and you're never 38th. It shows up differently for everybody, so everybody gets a fair shot. And then the other thing on, so many apps do make the decision to just do iOS, but you're really serving the top richest percent, is who has iPhones. And so it really is important that this is available to everybody who has any certain level of smartphone. And I think, obviously we have big dreams of having this be a global thing perhaps at some point, and Android is definitely the way the world works, so that part's been really, really fun and really creative and artistic to see how the developers develop for both platforms too. There's a lot that you can get into on that, of like the different kind of creative tools at each disposal.
Well, it's exciting. I wish you guys the best of luck. This is
Thank you.
It's a big moment. I think it's going to be monstrously successful. It's certainly certainly quite an undertaking.
Absolutely. And I think the most heartening thing, I think, for us, which also makes it the most intrepid in terms of putting something out there, is you want to do something new. You always want to do something novel that nobody's done, but you also don't want to do anything that no one thinks can be done. Because one obviously impacts competition, but the other impacts adaptation and adoption and believability of the product itself. And I think we've hit that sweet spot. Certainly when Chevy's going out and I'm going out and we're talking to music industry people, it seems like something that should have already existed, but never has. We always take that as a positive.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm sorry to see our interview end. I have to say, I went over. I know the hour's flown by. You guys are such creative, interesting, intelligent individuals, and I think together you're going to rule the world.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you. Likewise, from back at you.
From your lips, Toni.
Well, nobody listens to me, but
that's not true.
Nobody takes my opinion. My opinion.
If only you had podcast and fans. I think people like explicitly do listen to you. That's the thing. That's wonderful.
Well, I mean, I think I was so impressed by you guys. And again, I think what you're doing is just a monstrous undertaking. And to be, so young, the two of you are really young, to be as accomplished as you are. And, to join together to do this, it's amazing. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, as soon as I can, I'm going to be downloading it.
I can't wait for you to play. Yes. It really is fun. I mean, that's the part where this is probably, I was telling my mom, I think this is my favorite creative project I've ever done. Like the teams involved, obviously working with Khalid, like we always have fun, like dreaming up things and executing, but also the lottery themselves, like the people that make up the lottery staff is just, they're brilliant and they're creative, and they love music and they love artists, and it's just one of those just like hidden gems. I just feel like we just really did strike gold in getting to work with them on this, because they're so excellent at what they do, and applied to this, it's the way that this will be successful. If not for them, like it doesn't run, and so that part has been really, really, really fun.
Well, I'm always a big advocate in terms of collaboration in your industry. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so many things, unless you're writing a novel, right? A novel's very isolating. I think you write that to yourself. It's you and the computer. But most other forms, whether it be music or film, it has to be collaborative, right? There's so many hands in it along the way, right? From the writer to the person who performs the music or performs the role, brings the paper character to life, to the editor, to the engineers, to, the visual storytellers, along the way. There's so many hands in collaborating in your world. Right. So there isn't just this person comes in and hits a home run. It's this team comes in and wins together.
Although, Toni, I am intrigued now about the idea of collaborations in books like we have in music, like Malcolm Gladwell featuring Stephen King. And it's like this true story, sociological, psychological thriller at the same.
Hey, well, maybe your next app is books, right? People get to read their stories, and like years ago when they used to have stories serialized, right? They would in like newspapers back in the day, and they'd come up part 1, part 2, part 3, and people would serialize it for a year, a whole story. Maybe you'll come up with an app that'll do that and make even the novelist collaborate a little bit more.
I love that.
I see you want to be on the dev team. We'll keep your number.
Count me in.
I love it.
All right. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you very much
for being here. I wish you luck. And I'm going to say goodbye from everyone. It may interest you to know.